I'd like to give you my take on perseverance. Won't take long. I won't bore you too terribly. But then I'd like to open it up for a matter of discussion. Maybe we can talk about youth sports, some of the specific things in youth sports I might not have an opinion on. Maybe we'll talk about the state of the game in baseball. Maybe we'll talk about how Peyton Manning blew me off for dinner tonight. Maybe not. Okay, perseverance. Let me get into that. Perseverance is kind of really interesting because the streak is symbolic of perseverance. Automatically, when you play in that many consecutive games, you know there's going to be ups and downs. You're going to go through it all. People assume you know the secret. You have all the answers and you have all the secret. So people would come to me and say, how do you do it? What is the secret? And I'd have this blank look on my face, and I'd draw a blank, and I go, I don't know. I just do it. And I don't think that answer was really a good answer for them because they kind of go away dejected. Maybe I'm not being cooperative. I don't know what it is. So I thought, I got to come up with a better answer than that if people are going to ask me all the time. So it dawned on me one time when the reporters were asking me this question. They said, can your record ever be broken? You know, they used to say that Lou Gehrig played 2,130 games. That's a record that'll stand for all time, and you broke it. Can your record ever be broken? And I said, well, certainly. If I can break it, certainly somebody else can. There's nothing special about me. And then they said, okay, if it can be broken, what kind of player can break it? What kind of traits must that player have to challenge your record, to break your record? And I went, that's interesting. That gave me an idea. So I went home as an exercise, took out my yellow pads of paper, and I started to write up a list of some of the traits that I thought were important that you could be in a ball player that could break the record. And since my number was 8, my goal was to come up with 8 things. And I was successful this time. The first thing that I came up with is, and here's my list. You have to have the right approach. You have to have a strong will to succeed. You have to have a passion for what you do. You have to be competitive. You have to be consistent. You have to have conviction. You have to be strong, and you have to have the ability to manage your life personally. You have to have personal management skills. So let me break those all down really quickly for you. The approach. That was the single most important thing that I had going for me, is that my dad years ago kind of brainwashed me and said, your job as a baseball player is to come to the ballpark every day ready to play. And if the manager puts you in that lineup, then you respond as best you can. So your job is to come to the ballpark. Now, I thought that's what every ball player should do. You should come to the ballpark, put yourself in the hands of the manager. So if you want to blame somebody for the streak, I think it's the manager's fault because he kept writing my name in the lineup. And that approach really, really served me well my whole career, except for one brief period of time. In the early 90s, I was feeling a little sorry for myself. I was in a slump. Our team was losing. I was catching a lot of flack in the media. And so I went to seek out someone's advice. And the advice I went to seek was someone that had more experience than I did. And there was a guy on our team by the name of Rick Sutcliffe. He was 6'8", about 260, 270, big right-handed pitcher. I don't know if you remember him. Won the Cy Young, I think, with the Chicago Cubs at one point. But I went to him and I said, Rick, I said, do you think I should take a day off? This media is going to drive me crazy. If I take a day off, I know it's going to be a blitz of media, and I'm going to have to deal with that in the short term. But maybe it'll go back to normal and everything will be all right. What do you think, Rick? And he goes, I'm pitching tomorrow, and you could take a day off tomorrow, and certainly you'll be in the news. But it won't be on the front page, it won't be in the sports section, it'll be in the obituaries because I'm going to kill you. Now, at first I thought he meant it. I mean, he's a big guy, 6'8", and 260. I thought I was in trouble a little bit. But then he kind of smiled and said, look, when I pitch, I want the best team behind me to try to help me win a ball game. And you're the best shortstop. You contribute to this game a whole lot more than just with your bat. In a sense, he just said, stop whining, go fix your hitting, and everything will be fine. But he assured me, he said, every pitcher on our team feels the same way. You have no problem with your approach. Just go back to do what you're doing. And that was a significant moment because that elevated me and pushed me on to continue to believe that that was the right way to do things. So the first thing is your approach. Second one's your strong will to succeed. Now, I don't know where that one comes from. I mean, honestly, maybe I need to talk to the sports psychologist here or someone to figure out where it comes from. But I have a theory that it must come, you must be born with it. It must be genetic. Because when I was a kid, I used to throw fits all the time, and when things didn't go right. And then as life treats you, you end up having a son that acts the same way I did. And I know I didn't teach him that. So he must have got it in his genes. So you have to have a strong will to succeed. It's something that it matters to you and you need it. Number 3, you have to have passion for what you do. You have to love what you do. And I love baseball, and I think Dad in his most philosophical times would say things like, one of the things that's wrong with this country is we have too many people working at jobs that they hate. You get most of your satisfaction and joy out of the work you do and the good things that you do, and that's the secret of happiness. And I firmly believe that. Besides, when things go really bad, you're going to have to call on that love of what you do to continue to move forward. So you got to have a love of what you do. Number 4, you have to be competitive. Now, being competitive, most people think in terms of competition in baseball. For example, I got to compete with a pitcher as a hitter. And then we have to compete with the other team. We have to play the other team and try to compete them. The competition that I'm really referring to that I think that you really need to have is that internal competition. Now, I was a third baseman when I came to the big leagues. Earl Weaver had this bright idea that he was going to move me, 6'4", 225 pounds of me, over to shortstop as an experiment. And it was supposed to be a temporary sort of thing. And so I learned to play the position, and years later, every year I went to spring training, they kept saying, you're just going to go back to third. He's too big, he's too clumsy, he's too slow. And every year I had a challenge from some young whippersnapper shortstop that was going to take my job. And I didn't treat him badly, and I befriended him, and I gave him the wisdom of my experience, and I taught him. But at the same time, when I took ground balls with him or I had drills with him, I was keeping score. I was going to say, I'm going to execute better than he does in every little thing he does. And there was one thing that was really important to me. I was never going to quit taking ground balls before he did. And it got a little challenging as I got older in my career. I still maintain that I was 40 dealing with 20-year-olds, and your energy level is not the same when it's at that point. But fortunately enough, nobody ever challenged me on that. So it's very important for you to be competitive. Consistent. Consistent means, like Rick Sutcliffe said, you make contributions across the board, a wide variety of contributions. And the key to your success is you have to be consistent in those contributions. And they have to be on a daily basis, so you have to be able to recognize them, you have to adjust, you have to readjust, you have to figure out how you can make contributions to the team. If you're not hitting, do it with your glove. If you're not doing it with your glove, you've got to do it on the base pass. If you're not driving in runs, you have to score some runs. So those are the kind of things that you need to do. So when the manager sits in his office, he says, this guy's irreplaceable. If I take him out of the lineup, I'm missing so many elements of his game. I got to keep him in the lineup. So, that part is, are you guys taking notes? What am I on right now? Number 5, which is what? Consistency, that's right. Okay, number 6, we'll jump on there, is conviction. Now, conviction, when I look at it, a lot of people look at conviction I look at it as being a little stubborn. And when you're a little stubborn, people look at you. You really have to be strong enough in what you're doing, and you think what you're doing is right so much that you can withstand some criticism from your teammates, from the fans, from people, maybe from the popular vote sometimes, because you know what you're doing is right, and you have to be convicted. You have to have conviction that what you're doing is right. Now, Dad was a man of conviction. He was someone that always finished what he started, and people described him as stubborn as a mule. And so when I look back on him, I think that's probably a positive way to look at Dad. And to give you some idea of Dad's stubbornness, he lived a baseball life. He was a minor league manager for the first 14 years, and he was in the big leagues for I don't know how long, 37 years after that. And while he was in the minor leagues, he was away from home a lot. And so when he was home, he would go help do tasks in the neighborhood for other people in the neighborhood, so that when he was gone, they would reciprocate this sort of feeling towards family and for especially Mom. And so one of these tasks that he used to do during the wintertime, he used to plow out the whole neighborhood of snow. We didn't get very good snow removal in our neighborhood. So Dad had access to this big tractor, and this big tractor, he built this wooden plow, and every time that it snowed, he would go up there and start this tractor up and plow out the neighborhood. And everyone appreciated his efforts. He took great pride in the fact that he did that. One day he went up there to this tractor, tried to start up when it was in the worst of snowstorms. And the snow was coming down, and the battery was dead. he didn't really have an option. He looked around and saw this old crank. And he picked this crank up, and he started to crank the tractor. And as Dad was a teacher in everything he did, so he's trying to teach us kids how to crank a tractor, which we weren't really interested in. But he puts it down, and basically, for those of you that are more mechanically inclined than me, you might interpret this for me a little later. But the way I understood it was you push down on it, let the torque of the engine bring it back up. Push down on it, let the torque of the engine bring it back up. And he would say that, and he wasn't getting the desired results that he was looking at, so he said, I'm going to windmill this thing, which means I'm going to push down on it and pull up on it, push down on it and pull up to get more movement in there so it could actually turn over. So he started windmilling this thing, and there's a danger in that because when it backfires or when it starts up, if you're on your upswing and it slips off the handle, then you can't control the tractor crank, and that's exactly what happened. So he picks it up and it bangs him in the side of his head. Puts a cut on a big cut opens up on his head, blood starts pumping out. He takes an oily rag and sticks it up to his head. And he has his eyes are big, and I tell he's kind of dazed, but he's trying to figure out what to do. I'm hysterical. I just turned 16. I have my license now. I can drive the car that we have up there, and so I want to put him in the car right away to take him to the hospital. So I get him in the car. He doesn't say much to me. He just sits there with that oily rag on his head. So I start driving pretty recklessly towards the hospital. He calmly says, pull into the house. So I pull into the driveway in the house thinking, well, he's handling this really well. He's going to tell Mom. Mom's going to be there at the hospital to offer some sort of guidance. He goes in for a minute. He doesn't come out. So I go looking for him, running through the house, screaming hysterically, where's Dad? Where's Dad? What happened to him? I think he might be laying down in a pool of blood or something. Mom comes out. I make her frantic. We go down and find him locked into a bathroom down the bottom, and he's actually administering these steri strips to his head. And so I still thought, it was still bleeding a little bit. I still thought, okay, he stopped the bleeding. At least it's better than that oily rag. So we're going to go back to the hospital. He doesn't say a word, comes out and gets in the car. I start driving towards the hospital. He says, no, go that way. He goes back up, starts the tractor with the tractor crank, plows out the whole neighborhood, and never went to the hospital. So if you can imagine, I had a consecutive game streak that you saw, 2,632 games. My dad was with me for the first 11 years of that in the big leagues. So if you'd imagine if I had a little sore hamstring or turf toe or something, and I came in and tried to tell him that I couldn't play that day, how he'd react to that, it wouldn't go over very well. But he certainly was a man of conviction, and he probably took stubbornness just a little bit too far. But it's still good. So you have to be a person of conviction. Strength. You have to have physical strength and mental strength. Now the physical strength side of it is about preparation and taking care of your body and eating right and sleeping right and being available to your manager. It's a sense of responsibility for your job. The mental sense, or the mental strength, is about really focus and coming to the game every day with your game face on and ready to play. And that's a little bit tougher, but you still have to figure out what I need to do to prepare for that, what strategies I need to have, what pitcher is pitching, where I am, and you need to figure those things out. So you bring that to the table. So you need strength on both sides in order to play in all these games. And the last thing, which is a little bit hard to understand, but you have to be able to manage yourself. And I call that personal management. And what that means is there's a situation that comes up in your professional lives that's going to affect your ability to work or to play or do things. It's because some's going to be professional, some is going to be personal, but you have to figure out how to manage those situations so you can continue to do what you do at the highest level. For example, in baseball, I might have a manager that's feeling the hot seat. His team's not winning very much. He's starting to get criticized, and they say he's going to get fired. So then all of a sudden, the manager starts making comments about you in the paper. He starts deflecting the blame. And all of a sudden he says, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with Cal. Cal's not swinging the bat too well. I got to really sit down and figure that out. So when you recognize that there's a red flag goes up, that something's wrong, I have to manage that situation. So what I did, I would go in there and talk to the manager, make sure that he understood and was confident that I was okay in all the aspects of the baseball side. And I had to do that many times just to keep that on board. If I wouldn't have done that, you could easily see where that could go down a road where something might be done that wasn't necessarily right, but the momentum would get out of control. Another one was the media. I mentioned earlier when I was at a low point that the media sometimes would pick on you. Now, their job is to write about the story. But sometimes when the streak got so big, certain writers saw that as an opportunity to raise their profile to a new level so they could be considered for another bigger job in a bigger newspaper. And a lot of times that would happen. It would coincide when we're not hitting. And in baseball, you play 162 games. You have a great year, but you're going to go through periods of slowness and slumps. So when I would go through a slump, certain writers would pick, we're playing the Yankees, they write a big negative story about me. It gets picked up in New York and it goes all over the place. And then that writer then is interviewed on all the TV stations and it raises his profile for a little while. And so I had to manage that situation. And the way that I manage that is not go to another beat reporter and talk to him. It would be make myself available to be interviewed on TV, to be interviewed on the radio, and speak directly to the issue of, that was the criticism. And that would stop it in its tracks. I've seen many players that would just clam up and let that build and let that build, and all of a sudden the situation would be out of control, and sometimes they'd be traded away when they could have controlled it. Now sometimes it's just pure luck. Case in point, I have 2 kids. My daughter's 15 now, and my boy is 11. And my daughter was born in November. So she was there. She came November 22nd. I was there in the hospital. My wife had a C-section. I was in the hospital for 4 days with her. I got to feed her first, change her first, and get to know Rachel in the first 4 months of her life way different than I did Ryan. Ryan came along in July, which is right plunk down in the middle of the season. Now, he was born in 1993. Now, the streak thing is going on in a parallel sort of way. So my wife, during the course of her pregnancy, it wasn't the easiest of pregnancies. My boy was big and caused her all kinds of issues. And I can't relate to that, nor do I want to. But then my wife became more anxious, thinking, okay, you're going to be on the road. You rode half the time. You're playing baseball. I need to count on you to be there, when Ryan's born. And I said, I'd love to be there when Ryan's born. She goes, promise me you'll be there when Ryan's born. Now I'm thinking, a lot of things can happen, and maybe things will happen on a certain way. But I got this streak thing over here. What do I do with that? So I thought long and hard about it, and I thought to myself, somehow, some way this is going to work out. But it made me realize that if I miss a game because of the birth of my son, then a streak is going to end, and that day is going to be marked in history almost as a negative. And that's going to be my son's birthday. So I told my wife that, and it worked. But as luck would have it, and I said sometimes it works out as luck would have it, we come to around the time when Ryan's is going to come in. And again, he's a big old heavy baby. He's pushing out. He says, I want to come out. And the doctor looks at the schedule, and it just so happened he wanted to schedule another C-section. And there was an off day sitting right there. And so we scheduled on the off day, the morning of an off day. I had to fly back from Minnesota. It was a scheduled C-section. I was there for the birth of my son. And the next day, part of the next day, and I flew into Toronto to join the team. And in celebration, I had a 3-run homer in that game. That was a good sign, but everything seemed to work out. So sometimes you just need a little luck. So basically, now you know the secret of what my definition of perseverance is. And if I had to actually say that there was a point in all that, I would summarize it in a really simple fashion. First, you got to get in the game. Second, you got to persevere. And third, you got to learn. And I think with that attitude, that can take you places. So thank you for allowing me to give you my definition of perseverance. Let's open it up for questions and have a good old discussion so I can get out of the spotlight. Anybody got a good question for me? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Oh, you want to be on the mic? Please.
Yes, sir. What's your take on what happened a few days ago with the fans, Texas Rangers with the cheer and all that? About the fans being unruly and what happened with that?
What do you think?
I think the fans shouldn't do that. To a point of calling players names, and I'm sure you've been involved with that over your years. But I think there should be some happy medium where the fans can cheer or boo, but there's a certain limit that they can do, and or maybe move them back. But again, the player that did that is, he did wrong too. But with 2 wrongs, I think I'm right.
I agree with you. Next question. Okay. It's interesting, all the issues that we deal with, or you deal with more specifically with parents' behaviors and the pressure on winning and the negativity that comes in with the level of kids at 10 years old, that same attitude continues to go up the ladder. And again, if we're able to get change down here, then over the long haul, you're going to start to see less and less of that behavior. The major league stadiums, and I'm sure you guys have been in all the major league stadiums, especially down the lines with the bullpen, especially in the bleachers, that can be a very negative and hostile place. Those things come out of there. And a lot of people, because of the salaries and the ticket prices, they've convinced themselves and they rationalize that I pay your salary, I'm here to come in there, and this is my stress relief. And they let you have it. And sometimes you're able to take it better than other times, and sometimes it gets out of control. I don't know what happens specifically. But I think overall, if we start to change some of our attitudes early on, then people are going to be people. When you get so tied up in that, your reaction of boo is a reaction to something negative. And I think we all have done that at some point. You look at the TV, I watch a basketball game, somebody makes an error or a mistake or turns the ball over at the wrong time, and I don't want that to happen, and I'll kind of say something about it. I think we all can control ourselves to a point, but there's still a reaction. And I think baseball needs to do something about that. And in the areas that are the worst, maybe the bullpen areas in Oakland, they might have to have some more people down there to help support so it doesn't get to a point where it's back and forth, back and forth. I know that, I don't know, what inning of the game was it in? Probably was late in the game. So you might have had drinking that contributed and 8 innings worth of frustration and who knows what happened and back and forth, and all of a sudden somebody got hit with something and then everything breaks loose. So.
The husband said on TV that it's his right because he wanted to, because he paid for the ticket,
Mm-hmm.
and that he wanted to help his team by harassing, the opponent.
The home field advantage, huh? Again, we got to change that mindset overall. I think that's unhealthy, and people get into helping their team, but our society is a little bit like that. You get rewarded for you get a story about you. There's going to be a lawsuit. They're probably going to get some sort of money out of it. They get rewarded for that behavior, and I would imagine instead of stopping that, maybe that might increase for a while. So it's got to be dealt with. But hopefully, people will change. Yes, sir.
If you would, tell us about the first game that you sat out at the end of the street.
Ah. Did you guys hear that? He's got a great, strong voice, doesn't he? In case you didn't, tell us about what were you going through when you set out finally at the end, and when the streak ended after 2,632 games. Why? God, I don't know. I think after you playing that long, that was about 16 or 17 years, and at times you feel like you started to lose some of the support that you had, and from a very simple standpoint, it's a lonely place for a manager to sit in his office and try to figure out which 9 people he's going to have put out there to win a game. And I've had many managers tell me that the greatest comfort they had over their careers was the fact that they knew where I stood. They didn't have to come ask a guy whether they were okay to play today, whether they were injured, whether they felt up to it, or is everything okay. They could rely on me and count on me. So when that started to deteriorate a little bit and somebody didn't value that as much, I had made up my mind if we had fallen out of the pennant race, or if we didn't have a chance to make the wild card, that was going to be the year that I would just put it to rest. And my initial plan was to do it on game number 162, the last game of the season, which was almost kind of making a statement. I could have played 162 if I wanted to, but I just took the last one off. Let's clean the slate and let's start next year new. And my wife talked me out of it because that game was on the road. It was in Boston. And my wife said, I know how you're feeling, and I know that the reason that you're thinking this way, but everybody is celebrated in your honest approach to baseball, and they think it's a good thing and a good positive thing. So let's not make it a negative thing. Let's make it a positive thing. So she advised me to take the last game off at home, and that happened to be against the New York Yankees. I didn't tell anybody. It was about 7, I think it was a 7 o'clock game, a 7:05 game. I walked into the manager's office at 20 till after the lineups have already been posted out, and I told him, I said, today's the day, pull me out. And slowly, what I wanted to do was not create a big scene for it, but I wanted, when the Orioles took the field, I wanted people to realize that I wasn't there. And I was hoping they'd realize right away. And we had a young kid by the name of Ryan Miner, who came up and, when the manager told him, he didn't believe it. He thought it was a rookie prank. And he wouldn't take the field. And I said, Ryan, it's okay. This is really happening. Go play your position. I'm okay with it. And he finally ran out there. And I think the Yankees were the first to notice it. And the Yankees, under Joe Torre, came out, stood on the top step of the dugout, and gave me a kind of a tennis clap sort of thing in tribute. And that was a very special moment. But my thinking was the time was right. I wanted to make sure that I did it in that way after talking to my wife. And that turned out to be the most positive thing. And we were able to move on and we were able to celebrate it as opposed to looking at it as maybe a little bit of a negative. So we turned a potentially negative into a positive. Yes?
What was your youth sports experience like playing baseball as a child? And then, what was your youth sports experience like as a child playing baseball? And then the second part to that is, do your kids currently play? And if so, is there a change from how it was when you were growing up? And is it for the better or for the good? Is there things you would change, things that you would have kept the same from when you were playing?
Ooh. It's kind of funny. When you're a kid, you remember things in a glossy sort of way, and you probably don't remember it with the same perspective that really carries. But I do remember one thing about my youth baseball experience is that my mom was sitting in the bleachers behind home plate at the start of the season, and then she, by the first or second game, or the second or third game, she had brought her lawn chair to the game, and now she was sitting down the left field line by herself. And I think that what that indicated was a lot of the same issues that are surrounding youth baseball today, some of the pressures, some of the screaming out that occurs, some of the negative things and reactions to baseball, for whatever reason, comes from the parents, she was experiencing at that time. And it's kind of funny is by the end of the season, she had more people migrating to her than the people that stayed in the stands. It kind of exposed some of the people that were talking. I think that it's gotten a little bit worse, and this is the reason I think so, is because salaries of the big league players have gotten way bigger. And so that has sent a message to the parents and coaches that if I align myself with this particularly skilled kid, or I pour more attention or more pressure or more discipline on him, he's going to grow up to be Alex Rodriguez and he's going to bring back a big paycheck. And so you see that more and more. There's more specialization that occurs. It seems more people are putting pressure on the kids to perform instead of letting them learn at their own pace, letting them discover, what they like to do and what they don't like to do. And they're really zapping all the strength and the passion and the love of what they do out of the kids. I remember one parent told me, thanks. I remember maybe this frames it better. One parent told me, they said, we treat baseball in our house like homework. Every night you have to do 2 hours of homework. Every night you have to do 2 hours of baseball practice. And I turned around and said, how does your son feel about it? And he goes, well, he doesn't like it, but someday he'll thank me. And I think that kind of frames it in a way. And I wanted to tell him, I said, look, you're standing over him now, and you're making him do it. What happens when he gets a chance to make his own choice? When you're not standing over him anymore, and you're not the position that he's got to, in order to succeed, you got to have it come from within. And if you're not building it from within, when he meets his first challenge, I said, I would guess that he'd run away from that challenge. So you're doing him a disservice by doing that. But it's hard to get that sort of logic through to some people, and so maybe you just have to work on the other ones that you can.